The barrier was crumbling. Naruto Uzumaki, the 7th Hokage of Konohagakure, pressed his palms harder against the invisible wall of chakra that separated the living world from the encroaching void. Sweat dripped down his face, not from exertion, but from the sheer concentration required to hold back something that defied comprehension. Behind him, the screams of civilians echoed through the village streets. Children called for their parents. Mothers shielded their sons and daughters. The entire shinobi force stood ready to evacuate, but there was nowhere to run. The void had come. It wasn't an enemy in any traditional sense. No technique could defeat it, no blade could cut it, no seal could contain it. 12 years after the war ended, after peace had settled over the ninja world like morning frost, something had awakened in the spaces between dimensions. Scientists, both from Konoha's research division and allied villages, theorized it was the result of too much dimensional travel, too many holes punched in reality's fabric. Others whispered it was a consequence of the 10-tailed beast's resurrection and subsequent defeat. A few elders, speaking in hushed tones in the Hidden Leaf Library, suggested it was retribution for how the Sage of Six Paths' power had been handled across generations. Whatever it was hungry. Hokage-sama. Kakashi's voice crackled through the communication seal. His old teacher was 3 blocks away, shepherding the last of the evacuees. The barrier, how much longer? Naruto gritted his teeth. 3 weeks. That's how long he managed to hold it. 3 weeks of barely sleeping, of consuming pill after pill to maintain his chakra levels, of watching helplessly as the void expanded incrementally, eating away at everything in its path. The barrier had originally been the size of a grain of sand. Now it was 50 meters in diameter, and still growing. Get them to the forest of the moon, Naruto replied, his voice steady despite the trembling in his arms. Don't look back. There was a pause. In that silence, Naruto heard what Kakashi wasn't saying. I understand. Farewell, my student. Kurama stirred in his mindscape, his massive form shifting uneasily. The 9-tailed beast had been Naruto's companion, his brother, for nearly 20 years now. Their bond was unbreakable. They shared one consciousness, one heartbeat, one chakra network. You're going to do something reckless, the fox rumbled, ancient eyes opening in the darkness of Naruto's sealed space. It's not reckless if it's the only option, Naruto thought back to his companion. And what of me? What of our bond? Naruto's expression softened, even as the void pressed harder against his barrier. Every second, it was like pushing against an avalanche that never stopped coming. I'm sorry, old friend, but there's no other way. The 9-tailed beast fell silent. In that silence, Naruto felt something he rarely felt from Kurama, resignation, and beneath it, a profound sadness. Naruto's hands began to glow. Orange chakra, bright and warm as autumn leaves, spiraled around his fingers. He wasn't just maintaining the barrier anymore. He was pulling something deeper, something that lived in the very core of his being. The 6 paths chakra that had been gifted to him by Hagoromo himself, the sage who had founded the shinobi world. That power had protected him through the war, had allowed him to fight alongside the tailed beasts, had given him the ability to see and understand others. Now, he would use it one final time. The chakra intensified, burning brighter. His whisker marks, those distinctive marks that had marked him as a Jinchuriki since birth, began to glow with ethereal light. The barrier transformed, becoming not a wall but a seal, ancient symbols wrapping around the dimensional rift like chains forged from pure will. But seals required a sacrifice. They always had. That was the fundamental principle of sealing jutsu, a truth Minato had understood when he sealed the 9 tails into his own son, and Naruto, standing at the edge of the void, understood it now. The barrier wouldn't hold forever. But it would hold long enough for the village to evacuate. It would hold long enough for the other nations to develop countermeasures, to find a solution that didn't require sacrificing an entire village. And in holding it, Naruto would buy the world time. The cost would be his life. Boy, Kurama's voice was thick with something Naruto had never heard from the beast before, emotion that sounded almost like love. If you're going to do this, then let me do it with you. We've been together this long. Let us end together. Naruto's eyes burned with tears he didn't let fall. Thank you, Kurama. Thank you for everything. He poured more chakra into the seal. The void shrieked, a sound that had no physical source, that echoed through the dimensions themselves. The barrier shuddered. Cracks spread like lightning across its surface, and then, slowly, the cracks began to seal themselves. The void pressed harder. Naruto's bleeding hands glowed brighter. His body was breaking down now, the effort of sealing something so vast, so fundamentally destructive, tearing his cellular structure apart. He could feel his organs beginning to fail. His vision blurred at the edges. This is it, he thought, strangely calm despite the agony. This is how it ends. For a moment, Naruto wondered if this was always his destiny. Born as a container for a demon, destined to become a hero, and finally, destined to die not in glorious battle but in the quiet sacrifice of protecting a single village. It seemed almost poetic in its simplicity. The seal completed. The void shriek became a howl, a sound of frustration and rage and hunger unsatisfied. The barrier locked in place, sealed not by jutsu but by Naruto's life force, by his will, by the fundamental connection between his chakra and this world. Naruto's arms fell to his sides. He collapsed to his knees, then forward, his hands scraping against the stone of Hokage Plaza. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the village he loved, peaceful and safe behind him. The last thing he heard was Kurama, roaring in defiance even as their shared consciousness faded. Then nothing. There was light. Not the light of the living world, not sunlight or artificial illumination. This was something else, something that seemed to come from within rather than without. Naruto opened his eyes, when had he closed them, and found himself standing in an empty space. There was no ground beneath his feet, no sky above his head. Only light and an infinite expanse of nothing. For a long moment, Naruto simply existed in that space, trying to understand where he was. He had been dying. He could still feel the echoes of that pain in his bones, but now he felt neither pain nor any physical sensation at all. He looked down at his hands and found them translucent, almost ghostly. "You're between worlds," a voice said. Naruto spun around. Standing behind him, as solid and real as anything in this strange place could be, was an old man with long white hair and eyes that held the weight of centuries. He wore simple robes and carried no weapons, yet Naruto could sense the immeasurable power that radiated from him like heat from a fire. The Sage of Six Paths. Hagoromo looked exactly as he did in every historical account, every tapestry and painting. Yet Naruto had only seen him twice in his life. Once when the sage had first given him Six Paths chakra, and once more just before his death, when Hagoromo had come to say goodbye. That second meeting had been in Naruto's mindscape, a brief moment of acknowledgement between two beings who had fundamentally changed the course of history. "Sage," Naruto said, his voice strange in this soundless place. "Am I dead?" "Your body is dying," Hagoromo replied, his ancient eyes studying Naruto with an intensity that made the young man feel like he was being read like a book. "Your chakra is nearly spent. Your life force is fading from the world you knew. In moments, your consciousness will dissipate entirely, your energy returning to the natural flow of chakra. Then why am I here? Why can I see you?" "Because," the sage said, moving closer with a grace that belied his apparent age, "I have intervened. Between your death and your dissolution, I have paused this moment. We exist now outside of time, outside of the normal flow of cause and effect." Naruto's mind reeled. "Why would you do that?" The Sage of Six Paths smiled, and it was a sad expression, full of centuries of regret. "Because I have been watching you, Naruto Uzumaki. Since the moment you were born, since my chakra first awakened within you, I have observed your journey. I have seen how you have struggled, not just against enemies, but against the very nature of the world I created." "The world you created?" Naruto echoed. "All of this," Hagoromo gestured vaguely, and Naruto understood he meant not just the empty space around them, but the entire shinobi world, the concept of chakra itself. "When I first discovered chakra and spread it among humanity, I thought I was giving them a gift. The power to improve themselves, to grow stronger, to transcend their limitations. But power is a double-edged blade, Naruto. And I failed to foresee how my gift would corrupt." The sage turned away, his gaze distant. "My sons," Black Zetsu manipulated them with such skill that I didn't realize until too late. "My successors used my teachings as justification for war. The tailed beasts, which I meant to be guardians, became weapons. And the cycle perpetuated itself, generation after generation, each cycle of hatred breeding a new one, until I began to despair that the world I created could ever know true peace. Naruto listened in silence, hearing in the sage's voice the weight of countless ages. But then you were born, Hagoromo continued, turning back to face Naruto directly. A child of prophecy, yes, but not in the way the old texts foretold. Not a warrior destined to triumph through strength of arms, but a bridge. Someone capable of genuine connection, of breaking through hatred not through power, but through understanding. I failed, Naruto said bitterly. Wars still happened on my watch. People still died. And now the void has forced the choice I've been waiting for you to make, the sage interrupted gently. Naruto, in your first life, you were burdened by not knowing what you could do. You stumbled forward, learning as you went, reacting to circumstances rather than shaping them. But what if you had known? What if you had the full measure of your power from the beginning? What if you could see the patterns of fate and destiny, not as inevitable, but as suggestions, guidelines that could be rewritten? Naruto's eyes widened. You're saying, you want me to go back? I'm saying I am offering you a choice, Hagoromo said. Your first life was extraordinary, Naruto. But it was also limited by the constraints of fate, of prophecy, of the pre-existing cycle. I was not permitted to grant you my full knowledge until you had proven yourself worthy through the war itself. But now I can offer you something different. The sage raised his hand. In his palm, a light began to gather, not orange like Naruto's chakra, but white and gold, ancient and primal. This is my power, Hagoromo said. Not some fragment of it, as you've possessed until now, but the true essence of it. The knowledge of seals and chakra nature, the ability to sense all living things, the understanding of how fate itself is woven. All of this, I can give to you. But only if you consent to be reborn. Reborn? Naruto's voice was faint. Into the same world, the same timeline, but at an earlier point, the sage explained. I can set you at age 5, 16 years before your canonical arrival at the academy. With this knowledge, with my full power, you can prevent many of the tragedies that haunt this world. You can reshape the future, Naruto. You can make the peace you fought so hard for into something real, something lasting. Naruto's mind spun. 16 years. He could prevent Itachi's massacre of the Uchiha, or at least mitigate it. He could reach out to Nagato before hatred took root in his heart. He could help Obito, could guide Sasuke toward redemption rather than revenge. The possibilities seemed endless, tantalizing. What's the catch? Naruto asked, and he was proud that his voice didn't waver. A flicker of something, was it respect, crossed the sage's face. Wise. Yes, there is always a price. If I grant you my full power and send you back, I am expending the last of my will, my consciousness, my ability to influence this world. I will be gone, Naruto. Truly gone. No more interventions, no more subtle guidance. The world will be yours to shape, for better or worse. And Kurama? Naruto asked. My bond with him will be severed, the sage said, and his voice was heavy with sorrow. The nine-tailed beast will have no memory of your connection in this second life. You will have to form the bond anew, from the beginning. It will be painful, Naruto. I cannot lie to you about that. Naruto thought of Kurama, his closest friend for so long, his brother in all but name. The thought of facing him without recognition, without the ease of their connection, was almost enough to make him refuse. But the sage continued, there is hope in this pain. If you can forge the bond again, knowing what you know now, with the wisdom you've gained, that bond will be stronger, more genuine. It will be born not from circumstance but from choice. Naruto was quiet for a long moment. Behind the sage, the light that was not light began to shimmer with something that might have been impatience, or might have been the natural entropy of this between space, breaking down. If I refuse? Naruto asked. Then your consciousness will dissolve, and you will find peace in the natural cycle of chakra. You will not suffer. You will simply cease to be Naruto Uzumaki. Your memories, your bonds, your love, all of it will fade into the vast, impersonal flow of chakra that sustains all life. And the void? Will eventually break through the seal you've created. In perhaps 50 to 100 years, it will consume the shinobi world. Or perhaps civilization will adapt and evolve enough to find a solution. That future is not your concern if you choose to let go. Naruto looked at the light in the sage's palm. It was beautiful and terrible, full of promise and peril. To accept it would be to take on a burden he couldn't fully comprehend, the responsibility of reshaping a world. To refuse it would be to find peace, but also to abandon his world to an uncertain fate. What would you choose? He asked silently, thinking of all those he'd left behind. Kakashi? Sakura? Sasuke? Everyone I've ever fought for? They will grieve, the sage said, as if reading Naruto's thoughts, and perhaps he was. Your loss will be profound. But they will endure. They are strong. And if you choose to return to them. I want to try, Naruto said suddenly. The words burst out of him before he could second-guess them. I want to go back. I want to see if I can do better, change things, help people before they suffer instead of after. I want another chance. The Sage of Six Paths smiled, and it was a smile full of ancient approval. Then take my power, Naruto Uzumaki, Hagoromo said, extending his palm fully. Become my true successor. Not merely the inheritor of my chakra, but the bearer of my will. Change the world. Naruto reached out toward the light. As his ghostly fingers made contact with it, he felt a rush of sensation, knowledge flowing into him like a river, understanding blooming in his mind like flowers in spring. He saw patterns he had never perceived before, the threads of fate, the connections between people, the complex web of cause and effect that governed this world. And he saw, too, the scope of what he was taking on. The full weight of the sage's burden, accumulated over millennia, settled onto his shoulders. But somehow, impossibly, it felt right. The light consumed him. Naruto's eyes snapped open to the sound of birds singing. For a moment, he simply lay still, processing the sensation of having a body again. He was small, impossibly small. His hands, when he raised them, were tiny, soft-skinned, utterly untouched by the calluses of training. His chakra network was a thing of wonder, vast and untapped, but also somehow more organized than it had ever been. Where before his power had been a raging river, now it was a great reservoir, calm and contained. And his memories, his memories were perfect. Clear as crystal. Every conversation with Kakashi, every moment of pain and triumph, every failure and success, all of it there, arranged in perfect order. Naruto pushed himself up, looking around. He was in a small apartment. He could smell ramen broth. Was that at Shiraku's? Through the window, he could see Konohagakure as it had been when he was young. The village was smaller than he remembered it at this age, the buildings more weathered. The barrier wall that would later be reinforced hadn't been rebuilt yet from the war damage. He was back. Naruto scrambled out of the futon he'd been sleeping in and padded across the apartment floor. The mirror confirmed what he already knew. He was 5 years old again. Blonde hair, whisker marks on his cheeks, and eyes that now carried the weight of 2 lifetimes. This is real, he whispered to himself. Outside, the village was waking up. Naruto could sense the chakra signatures now with crystal clarity, a gift, he realized, of the sage's full power. He could pinpoint individuals across the entire village, could sense not just their presence but their emotional states, their intentions, their capacity for change. And he could feel, too, a familiar presence deep within his own chakra network. Kurama was there, slumbering dormant. The nine-tailed beast had no awareness of Naruto yet, no memory of their previous bond. To him, Naruto was just another presence in the space of his ceiling, strange but not yet threatening. Naruto closed his eyes and extended his consciousness toward Kurama gently, carefully, like approaching a wild animal. There was no recognition, no joy of reunion. There was only the curious, wary attention of a great beast acknowledging a smaller one. Hello, Naruto thought, and there was no bitterness in the greeting, only a profound sadness. It seems we're meeting for the first time after all. Kurama rumbled, a sound like distant thunder, but did not respond further. The beast returned to sleep, and Naruto withdrew his consciousness. He had the rest of his life to forge that bond anew. A knock on the door startled him from his thoughts. Naruto moved to answer it, and found an elderly man standing in the hallway, concern written across his weathered face. "Naruto," the third Hokage said, his eyes studying the boy with unusual intensity. "The neighbors heard unusual sounds from your apartment. Is everything all right?" Naruto almost laughed. The irony was almost too much, Hiruzen arriving at his door just as Naruto was awakening to his new life. Had the old Hokage sensed something? Or was this merely coincidence? But Naruto now understood that coincidence was often just another word for pattern too complex to immediately perceive. Hagoromo had given him that knowledge. "I'm fine, Hokage-sama," Naruto said, calling on memories of how he'd spoken as a young child. His voice felt strange in his throat, small and high. "I just had a strange dream." The third Hokage's eyes narrowed slightly. "A strange dream? Tell me about it." For a moment, Naruto considered telling the truth. Telling Hiruzen everything, about the void, about his sacrifice, about his rebirth. But something held him back. Not fear, exactly. More like caution, a sense that revealing too much too soon could create complications. The knowledge the sage had given him included an understanding of cause and effect, of how revealing information at the wrong time could ripple outward in unintended ways. "I dreamed I was falling," Naruto said, choosing his words carefully. "But then I was caught. And I woke up." Hiruzen studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, his expression softened. "Dreams can seem very real," the old man said gently. "Especially at your age. When you sleep, sometimes the boundaries between imagination and reality become blurred." "Is that what this was?" Naruto asked. "Just a dream?" "I think so," Hiruzen said, and there was something in his voice that suggested he was trying to convince himself as much as Naruto. "But if you have more strange dreams, you can always come tell me. The Hokage is here to help his people, after all." "Thank you," Naruto said sincerely. After the third Hokage left, Naruto returned to the window and looked out over the village. Somewhere out there was young Sasuke, probably waking up to another day of pressure from his clan. Somewhere out there was Sakura, still bullied for her forehead, still insecure about her place in the world. And far to the east, in a hidden village tucked away in misty valleys, was Nagato, just a boy, perhaps already beginning to hear whispers of prophecy. Naruto had 16 years. 16 years to find these people, to understand them, to help guide them away from the paths that would lead to tragedy and suffering. It was an enormous responsibility. It was an impossible task. It was, Naruto reflected with something that might have been a smile, exactly the kind of challenge that had always driven him forward. The sun rose over Konohagakure, and in a small apartment in the ninja village, a 5-year-old boy with 2 lifetimes of experience began to plan how to save the world. "The cycle breaks here," Naruto said to himself, speaking to the empty air and the ghost of the sage's presence. "I'll make sure of it." In the mindscape, deep within his sealed prison, the 9-tailed beast stirred briefly, disturbed by dreams of a familiar voice calling from beyond the veil of time. But it was only a dream, and Kurama settled back into sleep. The cycle, it seemed, was indeed beginning to break. The morning sun filtered through the leaves of the training ground's ancient trees, casting dappled shadows across the dirt. Naruto stood in the center of a small clearing, his 5-year-old body looking impossibly small against the vast expanse of nature around him. In his hands he held a practice kunai, one of the blunt training tools that children used before they were deemed ready for real weapons. He had been in this new life for exactly 3 weeks, and already he could feel the pressure of restraint. The knowledge the sage had given him was like having a perfectly organized library inside his mind. Every seal technique, every chakra control method, every pattern of combat, it was all there, filed away in perfect clarity. He could sense the flow of chakra through his own network with absolute precision, could feel Kurama's presence deep within his seal like a sleeping mountain. The frustrating part was that his body couldn't keep up with his mind. Naruto focused his attention inward, gathering the vast reservoir of chakra that flowed through his 5-year-old frame. In his previous life, this would have been reckless. Attempting to use advanced chakra control at such a young age would have risked damaging the delicate pathways that were still forming. But Naruto wasn't the same person he'd been at 5. And more importantly, the sage's power had reorganized his chakra network to be far more efficient than it had been in his first life. He had already mapped out the improvements. His chakra coils were wider, more resilient. The seal holding Kurama was more sophisticated, allowing for better control and communication. And at the core of his being, where his vital organs met his chakra network, there was a new structure, something the sage had created, a sort of filter or governor that would allow Naruto to gradually increase his power output without rupturing his developing body. It was brilliant, really. The kind of foresight that could only come from someone who had lived as long as Hagoromo. Naruto moved through the hand seals he'd learned in the academy of his previous life, but performed them with a precision that would have been impossible for a normal 5-year-old. His fingers moved with the fluidity of someone who'd practiced the motions 10,000 times. Because he had, just not in this body. Shadow clone jutsu, he whispered, pressing his palms together. Nothing happened. Naruto frowned. He'd expected his chakra control to be good, better than good, but perfect enough to perform a B-rank jutsu? He was only 5. Even with the sage's modifications, there had to be some limitations. He tried again, this time feeding the hand seals more chakra, pushing harder against the boundaries of his young body. This time, there was a puff of smoke. A second Naruto appeared beside him, looking exactly identical except for the slightly dazed expression on its face. The clone looked down at its hands in confusion, then at its original. I exist, the clone said, sounding genuinely surprised. Naruto couldn't help but smile. Even in his first life, his shadow clones always seemed to experience a moment of existential wonder upon being created. It was one of the quirks of his technique. Something about how his chakra interacted with the jutsu made the clones unnaturally aware of themselves. He dismissed the clone with a thought, and it popped back into existence with a small burst of chakra that flowed back into his network. Too early, Naruto muttered to himself. I shouldn't be able to do that yet. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't really too early. The sage hadn't sent him back to live as an ordinary 5-year-old. He'd sent him back as someone extraordinary, someone whose power had been waiting to awaken. Impressive. Naruto spun around, kunai raised defensively before he'd even consciously decided to move. Standing at the edge of the training ground was a man in his early 20s, with striking red hair and a calm expression. He wore the Uchiha clan emblem on his chest. Itachi, Naruto's mind identified him instantly. At this point in the timeline, Itachi Uchiha would be about 23 years old, a prodigy of the highest caliber, and still, as far as the village knew, a loyal member of Konoha. But Naruto knew the truth. Itachi knew about the Uchiha massacre. Probably planning it, in fact, or at least being subtly guided toward it by forces Naruto didn't fully understand yet. That's a dangerous jutsu for a child your age, Itachi said, stepping into the clearing with the kind of casual grace that only came from supreme confidence. His Sharingan eyes, still in their normal black state, studied Naruto with mild curiosity. Where did you learn the shadow clone jutsu? Naruto's mind raced. He couldn't tell the truth. He couldn't explain that he'd learned it years in the future, that he had perfect recall of techniques learned in a life that technically hadn't happened yet. But he also couldn't appear to be a normal 5-year-old, because that would create its own complications. He needed to present himself as a prodigy, yes, but one whose abilities could be explained within the normal framework of reality. My father taught me, Naruto said carefully, and it wasn't even a lie. Minato Namikaze had been the one to create the shadow clone jutsu, after all. Before he died. He wanted me to be strong. This was a risky gambit. Most people in the village didn't know that Naruto was Minato's son. The third Hokage had kept it secret, both for Naruto's safety and to prevent the village from treating him differently. But Itachi was intelligent, probably intelligent enough to have figured out the truth. Itachi's expression didn't change, but his eyes flickered, a subtle reaction that Naruto's enhanced perception caught easily. I see, Itachi said softly. So that's the nature of your talent. You inherited your father's gift for sealing and jutsu development. He knows, Naruto confirmed. Or at least he's pieced together enough to make an educated guess. Are you going to tell people? Naruto asked, deciding that directness might be the best approach with someone like Itachi. Should I? Itachi replied, moving to lean against one of the training ground's wooden posts. There was no threat in the gesture, but there was definitely an assessment happening. Naruto could feel it. Itachi's chakra extending outward, probing, testing, measuring. It seems that someone has already taken steps to keep this information secret. The third Hokage, perhaps? Or one of the other elders? The third Hokage, Naruto confirmed. He said it would be safer if people didn't know. Safer for whom? Itachi asked, and there was something almost philosophical in his tone. For you, or for the village? Because I would argue that a village that raises its shinobi in ignorance of their own heritage is not a village at all, but a cage. Naruto felt a chill run down his spine. These were the words of someone who had already begun to question the foundations of everything he'd been taught, the slow erosion of belief that would eventually lead to the massacre. Knowledge is power, Naruto said carefully, but it can also be a burden. My father, he was the fourth Hokage. Powerful. Respected. And it didn't save him. Itachi's eyes narrowed slightly. No, it didn't. The nine-tailed beast's attack destroyed him, despite all his power and all his knowledge. Perhaps that's the real lesson of your father's death, that individual strength, no matter how great, is insufficient against the forces arrayed against us. That's dark, Naruto thought. Even for Itachi. But the young Uchiha prodigy wasn't wrong, exactly. Minato had died because he'd faced an enemy he couldn't defeat through strength alone. He'd had to sacrifice himself, to use the ultimate seal, the one that would eventually be used to seal the Nine Tails into Naruto himself. I think, Naruto said slowly, choosing his words with care, that my father believed in something more than strength. He believed in bonds. In the connections between people. Itachi studied him for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost reflective. Bonds, he repeated. Yes, I've heard that philosophy before. It's fashionable among the stronger shinobi in this village, the idea that connection is a source of power. And perhaps in some cases that's true. But bonds are also vulnerabilities, aren't they? They're weights that hold you down, expectations that limit your potential, or they're anchors that keep you grounded, Naruto countered. Bonds don't have to limit you. They can help you. Perhaps, Itachi said, and he straightened from the post. Or perhaps that's simply what people tell themselves to justify their weakness. Either way, it's an interesting philosophy, young Naruto Uzumaki. I hope you hold on to it. The world will test your convictions. Before Naruto could respond, Itachi turned and walked away, disappearing into the forest with the silent grace of an elite shinobi. Naruto watched him go, his enhanced senses tracking the young man's chakra as it moved swiftly through the trees and toward the Uchiha compound. So, Naruto thought, that's what Itachi is like up close. More ideologically unstable than I expected. The massacre might happen sooner than I thought. Kurama stirred in his mindscape, disturbed by the intensity of Naruto's thoughts. What was that? The nine-tailed beast rumbled. Who was that person? A friend who's about to become an enemy, Naruto thought back to the fox. At least, that's what happened in the stories I remember. But maybe I can change that. Stories you remember? Kurama's consciousness pressed against Naruto's, curious and confused. You're strange, small human. I can feel something in you that doesn't fit. Power older than the seal, older than my imprisonment. Naruto didn't know how to explain his situation to Kurama. How could he? He was a 5-year-old child to the nine-tailed beast, despite the ancient mind that inhabited this small body. I'm someone who wants to help, Naruto finally answered. And I want to help you most of all. Help me? Kurama seemed genuinely confused by this concept. The only thing humans have ever done is imprison and exploit me. Why would you help? Because I believe you're more than just a beast of destruction, Naruto replied. Because I think, if you were given a choice, you might choose differently. Kurama didn't respond, but Naruto could feel the nine-tailed beast settling back into its slumber, processing these strange concepts. For the first time in his consciousness, someone had suggested that the great fox had any agency in its own fate. Over the next several months, Naruto established a routine. By day, he attended the Standard Academy for young ninja hopefuls. Though technically, at 5 years old, he wasn't eligible for the main academy yet. The third Hokage had arranged special tutoring with various instructors, a combination that allowed Naruto to receive ninja training while still appearing to be just an exceptionally gifted civilian child. His instructors were always puzzled by his abilities. The hand-to-hand combat instructor couldn't understand how a 5-year-old could perform techniques that typically took years to master. The chakra control specialist watched in amazement as Naruto manipulated his energy with a precision that should have been impossible. The seal expert, an elderly woman named Suki who had been one of Minato's students, kept giving him strange looks, as if she was seeing something in him that reminded her of his father, but none of them pushed too hard. The third Hokage had given his instructions: teach the boy, monitor his progress, but don't ask questions about his unusual aptitude. By night, Naruto trained alone in the forests around the village. This was where he truly pushed himself, where he allowed the full scope of the sage's power to begin flowering. He worked on the techniques he'd learned in his previous life, but now with the understanding that came from having the sage's knowledge, why each seal worked the way it did, what principles of chakra manipulation underlay every jutsu, how to optimize his performance. He also worked on preventing the seal from degrading as he grew. The seal holding Kurama was intricate, designed to last indefinitely, but Naruto realized he could make it better. He spent hours, sometimes entire nights, refining the chakra pathways, making the seal more efficient and more flexible. Kurama noticed. "You're doing something," the nine-tailed beast said one night, about 4 months after Naruto's rebirth. To the seal. "Making it different. Better," Naruto corrected, continuing to trace the seal's pattern with his chakra. "I'm making it better. Less restrictive. Eventually, I want you to be able to move freely, without the seal limiting you." "But I'm imprisoned," Kurama said, and there was something almost philosophical about the statement. "A seal is meant to restrict. That's the nature of seals." "Not the kind I'm creating," Naruto replied. "My seals are based on a different principle. Not restriction, but structure. Think of it like, instead of a prison, I'm creating a building. The walls exist, but you can move through them. They support rather than confine." There was a long silence from Kurama. Then, slowly, the nine-tailed beast spoke again. "Why would you do this for me? I've done nothing but destroy. I've killed humans by the thousands. In my rage, I devastated an entire village. Because none of that was your choice," Naruto said simply. "You were manipulated by Black Zetsu. You were used as a weapon by humans who couldn't understand you. And yes, you destroyed things, and people died. But I don't believe that's what you are. I believe you're more than that." "You don't even know me," Kurama said, but there was less certainty in the statement now. "Then let me get to know you," Naruto replied. "Let me prove that I'm not like the other humans. That I'm not going to use you or exploit you. That I actually see you as a person, not a weapon or a monster, but a being with thoughts and feelings and the right to choose its own path." The nine-tailed beast was silent for a very long time after that. By the time Naruto turned 6, he had made his first significant change to the timeline. It came about almost by accident. He had been at the market, buying supplies for his apartment, when he witnessed a Uchiha clan member aggressively demanding payment from a shop owner, more than fair price, clearly taking advantage of the merchant's fear of the noble clan. Without thinking too much about the consequences, Naruto had intervened. His small form had stepped between the shopkeeper and the Uchiha, his 5-year-old face set with surprising determination. The Uchiha, a younger member of the clan probably in his early teens, had laughed. "Move, brat," the Uchiha had said. "This doesn't concern you." "It does," Naruto had replied. "Because theft is theft, whether you're wearing a clan emblem or not." The Uchiha had raised a hand to hit him, and Naruto, moving with an instinct born from years of combat experience, had caught the blow. Then he'd used the young man's own momentum against him, sending him flying through the market stall, which had promptly collapsed, spilling vegetables everywhere. The Uchiha had gotten up, his Sharingan activating in rage, only to find himself staring into Naruto's eyes. And Naruto, drawing on the sage's knowledge of genjutsu and the patterns of human perception, had crafted something that wasn't quite a genjutsu but wasn't not one either, a subtle pressure of will that made the Uchiha realize, with crystalline certainty, that he was outmatched. The young man had retreated, swallowing his pride and his anger, and the market had returned to normal. But that single incident had consequences. The story spread through the Uchiha compound. A small, blonde child, no more than 5 years old, had humiliated one of their clan members. By accounts, the child had moved like a trained shinobi, with speed and technique that should have been impossible. Most of the Uchiha were intrigued rather than offended. Their clan valued strength and skill, after all. But a few, particularly the elders, were concerned. Who was this child? Why was he so strong? And most importantly, why was he capable of defeating a trained Uchiha with apparent ease? Within a week, Naruto received a visitor. He was training in the clearing where he'd first met Itachi when the figure emerged from the trees. She was a woman in her late 30s, with the distinctive black hair and eyes of the Uchiha clan. She carried herself with the authority of someone of high rank, and her gaze was sharp enough to cut steel. Naruto Uzumaki, the woman said, and her voice carried a note of respect that was unusual for an adult addressing a child. I am Mikoto Uchiha, wife of Fugaku and mother of Itachi and Sasuke. I've come to personally assess your abilities. Naruto bowed respectfully. Mikoto Uchiha, he remembered her from his previous life, though only vaguely. She had been a gentle presence in the background of the Uchiha compound, supportive of her children but ultimately overshadowed by her husband's ambitions. She had died in the massacre, killed along with the rest of the clan. This woman will be murdered, Naruto thought grimly. By her own son, if I can't change things. I'm honored to meet you, Mikoto-sama, Naruto said aloud. But I'm not sure what you want from me. An honest assessment of your combat abilities, Mikoto replied. My clan has certain protocols for identifying and nurturing exceptional talent. If you are indeed as skilled as the reports suggest, we would like to understand how you've reached such a level at your age. Naruto considered his options. Refusing would be suspicious, and it might alienate the Uchiha clan at a crucial moment. On the other hand, revealing too much of his power could create complications down the line. I would be happy to spar with you, Naruto said finally, if you're interested. Mikoto smiled. I was hoping you would say that. The spar that followed was unlike anything Naruto had experienced in this timeline. In his previous life, he'd fought many Uchiha, Sasuke obviously, but also various members of the clan during his time as a shinobi. But he never fought one of the clan elders, never witnessed the full capabilities of someone who had spent decades honing their Sharingan technique. Mikoto moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, her every motion economical and purposeful. Her Sharingan was active from the beginning, and Naruto could see her reading his movements, predicting his attacks, responding with techniques that seemed to know what he was going to do before he did it. But Naruto had the sage's knowledge, and more than that, he had access to techniques that transcended simple Sharingan prediction. He moved with the fluidity of someone who had fought dozens of wars, who had grappled with foes of impossible power, who understood chakra at a fundamental level that went beyond mere control. The spar lasted nearly an hour. By the end, Mikoto was breathing heavily, her Sharingan deactivated, and her expression was one of profound surprise. You're not human, she said finally. Not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. I am human, Naruto replied, also breathing heavily but with less exertion showing on his face. Just, not entirely normal. Mikoto sat down on one of the training grounds benches, and Naruto carefully sat beside her, maintaining the careful respect due to an elder. You move like someone far older than 6, Mikoto said after a moment. Your technique has a fluidity that suggests decades of training. And your chakra. She paused, her eyes distant. Your chakra signature is unusual. Ancient in a way. Like nothing I've ever sensed. Naruto decided to take a calculated risk. I am who I am, he said carefully. I can't explain everything about my abilities. But I can tell you this, I have no interest in destabilizing the village or the clans. I just want to help people. Mikoto looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. You know, she said softly, my son Itachi has been troubled lately. More withdrawn than usual. He's been questioning things, tradition, duty, the nature of power. I was beginning to worry about him, but perhaps... She trailed off, seeming to reconsider her words. Perhaps what he needs is not more lectures about clan responsibility, but an example of someone who has power without corruption, someone who uses strength to help rather than to dominate. Naruto understood what she was suggesting. You want me to be his friend? I want you to be his mirror, Mikoto said. I want you to show him that there are paths available to him besides the ones his father has laid out. Can you do that? This is it, Naruto realized. This is the chance to change things. Mikoto is reaching out because she senses that something is wrong with Itachi. If I can help him, if I can show him a different way. Yes, Naruto said simply. I can do that. By the time Naruto reached 7 years old, his influence on the village, subtle though it was, had begun to grow. He had, through careful networking and the kind of chance encounters that weren't really chance at all, become something of an acquaintance to many of the younger ninja and promising academy students. He was still small, still too young to officially attend the academy, but he trained alongside the older children with permission from the third Hokage. More importantly, he had begun to form genuine connections with people who, in his first life, had become his closest bonds. Sasuke, now 3 years old, had no recollection of future events, of course, but Naruto had carefully positioned himself so that he would cross paths with the young Uchiha prodigy. The meeting seemed natural, coincidental. A 6-year-old training near where Sasuke was being taught by his father. A shared meal at Ichiraku's ramen shop. An encounter at the marketplace. By the time Sasuke was 5, he had begun to see Naruto as an older, more experienced mentor figure, someone worthy of respect, but not someone whose shadow he lived in the way he did his father's or Itachi's. Sakura was a different story entirely. Because Naruto had intervened early and prevented some of the bullying that had marked her academy years, she had grown into a more confident, self-assured child. She still trained hard, still pushed herself to prove her worth, but she did so from a place of pride rather than desperation. And Itachi. Itachi was the key to everything. Naruto had sought him out deliberately, cultivating the acquaintance that had begun with that first meeting in the training ground. It was difficult. Itachi was intelligent enough to see through obvious manipulations, and proud enough to resent someone trying to change him. But Naruto didn't try to change him. Instead, he simply offered what Itachi had never had, an equal. Someone who could match him in combat, who could understand his frustration with the limitations placed on him, but who also represented something different, a path that didn't lead to anger and destruction. One evening, about a year after Naruto's first meeting with Itachi, the two of them sat together in a clearing overlooking the village. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Naruto was still only 6 years old physically, but his eyes carried a weight that belied his age. You could kill me if you wanted, Itachi said abruptly, breaking a comfortable silence. Naruto didn't deny it. Yes. Why don't you? Why would I? Naruto replied. You're not my enemy. Everyone is everyone else's enemy eventually, Itachi said, and there was a bitterness in his voice that Naruto had come to recognize. We're shinobi. We're taught that loyalty to clan supersedes loyalty to nation, that duty to nation supersedes loyalty to village. Eventually, those obligations conflict, and when they do... He shrugged. Blood is spilled? It doesn't have to be, Naruto said, and he put all his conviction into those words. That's the thing everyone forgets, Itachi. Yes, conflict is inevitable. But bloodshed isn't the only answer. Understanding is possible. Change is possible. You sound like a philosopher, Itachi said, but there was something almost wistful in his tone. Or perhaps a dreamer. Both, Naruto admitted. But I'm also a realist. I know that change is hard. I know that sometimes people won't listen, won't try, won't choose the path of least resistance even when it's offered to them. But I also know that it's worth trying, because the alternative is unacceptable. Itachi was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. You speak as if you've seen things that I haven't, he said slowly. As if you know what happens if people choose hatred over connection. Where does that knowledge come from, Naruto? Naruto had to make a decision in that moment. How much could he tell Itachi? How much should he reveal about his nature? I've lived a lifetime already, Naruto said finally, choosing his words with care. Not in this body, but in another time. I've seen what happens when shinobi choose the path of individual power over bonds. I've seen the massacre of the Uchiha clan. Itachi's entire body went rigid. That's impossible, he said flatly. I know, Naruto replied. But it's true. And I know it's coming, Itachi. Unless something changes. Unless you choose differently? The young Uchiha turned to face him fully, his Sharingan activating with a furious pulse of chakra. You're lying, Itachi said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Or you're trying to manipulate me with some kind of genjutsu. No genjutsu, Naruto said, making no move to defend himself against the active Sharingan. And I'm not lying. I can't prove it to you in a way that will make you believe without doubt. But think about it, Itachi. Think about the way I move, the way I understand you, the way I seem to know things about you that I should have no way of knowing. It all points to the same conclusion. I'm not what I appear to be. Itachi deactivated his Sharingan slowly, his young face troubled. Why would the sage send you back? He asked quietly. If you're telling the truth, why would Hagoromo interfere in this way? The fact that Itachi knew about the sage's involvement told Naruto something important. The young Uchiha had been studying forbidden texts, accessing knowledge that was restricted even within his own clan's library. He was further down the road to his eventual breakdown than Naruto had realized. Because the cycle needed to break, Naruto said simply. Because the sage saw that without intervention, the shinobi world would consume itself. Because he believed I could help change things. Can you? Itachi asked. Can you really prevent what's coming? I don't know, Naruto admitted, and it was perhaps the most honest thing he'd said to anyone in this new life. I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying to understand the currents of fate, to see where the breaking points are, where I can apply pressure to change the outcome. But Itachi, some things might be fixed points. Some things might be inevitable no matter what I do. I can only try. Itachi stood, his silhouette stark against the fading light. Then try harder, the young Uchiha said, and his voice was fierce with something that might have been hope or might have been desperation. Because if you're right, if I'm destined to become a murderer, then I want to know there's someone out there fighting against that destiny. I want to know that I'm not just a tool of fate. You're not, Naruto said, standing as well. You're not a tool, and you're not alone. I'm here, Itachi. And I believe in you. I believe that you can choose a different path. For a moment, the two of them stood together in the gathering darkness. Two impossibilities, a reborn man in a child's body and a young prodigy on the edge of becoming a monster, bound together by something that might have been hope, might have been desperation, or might have been the simple human need to believe that change was possible. 6 months later, Naruto underwent a transformation that surprised even himself. It had been a gradual process, really, months of careful work on the seal holding Kurama, months of daily communication with the nine-tailed beast, months of showing the great fox that he was different from every human who had come before. But it crystallized on one specific night when Naruto was 7 years old, and sleeping in his small apartment. He slipped into his mindscape deliberately, something he'd been practicing more and more. The space where the Nine-Tails was imprisoned was vast and dark, lit only by the faint glow of the seal itself. Kurama lay at the center of it, a massive shadow against the darkness, but as Naruto approached, the fox lifted its great head. You're different tonight, Kurama rumbled. Your presence feels stronger. I've been working on something, Naruto said, and he extended his consciousness outward, showing the nine-tailed beast the work he'd done. The seal was still there. It would always need to be there, to some degree, but it had been transformed. Instead of a barrier, it was now a network of connections, a web of chakra pathways that ran between Naruto and Kurama like threads of silver light. What is this? Kurama asked, but the beast didn't pull away. Instead, the fox seemed to extend its consciousness along the pathways, exploring, testing, understanding. Partnership, Naruto said simply. I'm not locking you in anymore, Kurama. I'm opening myself to you. Completely. No barriers, no restrictions. You can feel my emotions, my thoughts, my intentions, and I can feel yours. We're connected now, not as jailer and prisoner, but as partners. Kurama was silent for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, the great fox moved. It circled Naruto's consciousness, examining this gift, this transformation of what had been its prison into something that felt almost like home. Why? The beast finally asked. Why would you do this? Because I trust you, Naruto replied. Because I believe that you're not just a weapon or a monster. Because I think, if anyone would ever treat you with respect, if anyone would ever see you as something more than a tool, it should be me. And because, Naruto hesitated, then continued. Because in another life, we were brothers. And I want to rebuild that. Kurama's response was not words, but a wave of emotion so intense that Naruto was nearly overwhelmed by it. Loneliness. Longing. Anger at centuries of abuse. And beneath it all, a desperate, hungry hope that perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps this small human was telling the truth. Perhaps there was a possibility that existence didn't have to mean suffering. Then let us be brothers again, Kurama said finally. And let me help you change this world. Because if you can show me kindness, perhaps you can show it to others as well. Perhaps you can teach the world to see us not as demons, but as something worthy of respect. When Naruto woke the next morning, he felt fundamentally different. The connection between him and Kurama was no longer a careful arrangement of control and containment. It was genuine communion. He could feel the nine-tailed beast's presence like a second heartbeat, could sense the fox's curiosity and interest as the great beast began to explore this new world of possibilities that had been opened to it. And more than that, he could feel Kurama's power flowing into him in a way it never had before. Not in a dangerous or overwhelming way, but steadily, naturally, as if the seal was no longer something that trapped the fox's chakra but rather a bridge through which they could share it. When Naruto went to meet Kakashi that day for his usual training session, the old copy ninja had taken over much of his formal instruction. With the third Hokage's blessing, the masked man stopped mid-movement. Your chakra, Kakashi said, his eye widening behind his mask. It's changed. You and the Nine Tails. We reached an understanding, Naruto said simply. He was never my enemy, Kakashi. He was just imprisoned by circumstance and hurt by misuse. Now that he knows I'm not going to use him, now that he understands I actually respect him, things have changed. Kakashi was quiet for a long moment. Then he released a long breath. Do you understand how dangerous this is? The old ninja asked. If the village finds out that you've formed a genuine bond with the nine-tailed beast, they won't, Naruto interrupted. Kurama is going to keep his chakra contained within the seal unless absolutely necessary. We're not trying to hide anything, but we also understand that people fear what they don't understand. But Kakashi, I needed you to know. Because you're one of the few people in this village who might understand that what I'm doing isn't dangerous. It's the only way forward. Kakashi studied the 7-year-old boy in front of him, seeing not a child but something far more complex. A being who carried within him the weight of prophecy and the burden of change. Your father would have been proud, Kakashi said finally. Minato always believed that bonds were the source of true power. And you've taken that belief further than I think he ever imagined. Later that night, as Naruto meditated in the training ground, a familiar presence joined him. Itachi stepped into the clearing, and for a moment the two impossible beings, one reborn, one destined to become legendary, simply regarded each other in silence. I can feel it, Itachi said. Your connection with the Nine Tails. It's changed. And your power. The young Uchiha shook his head in wonder. You're not just growing stronger, Naruto. You're becoming something new. Something that might actually be capable of changing destiny itself. I'm trying, Naruto said. That's all I can do. Try, and hope that it's enough. It will be, Itachi said, and there was certainty in his voice. Because you believe it will be. And I'm beginning to think that belief itself might be the greatest power of all. As Itachi left the clearing, disappearing back into the night, Naruto felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. 7 years into his second life, and already the threads of fate were beginning to shift. Not catastrophically, not in ways that would draw attention, but subtly, like a river beginning to change course. The cycle was breaking, and for the first time since his rebirth, Naruto allowed himself to hope that change was truly possible. The Konoha Academy was a sprawling complex of training grounds, classroom buildings, and practice fields that had educated ninja for generations. It was here that Naruto, now 8 years old, began his official training alongside the other academy students, though his path through the institution would be anything but standard. The third Hokage had arranged for a special curriculum. Naruto would attend classes with students roughly his age while also receiving advanced instruction from various Jonin instructors. Ostensibly, this was to accommodate his natural talent and accelerated learning pace. In reality, it was a way to keep his true nature hidden while still allowing him to develop his abilities. Naruto's first day in the academy's primary section was marked by something of a stir. The instructor, a stern woman named Kurenai Yuhi, had been informed that she would be receiving an exceptional student. But nothing could have prepared her for what she encountered. "All right, students," Kurenai announced to the classroom of 15 8-year-olds. "Today we're going to begin with basic chakra control exercises. Everyone line up along the training wall, and we'll see who can climb it using only chakra." The children moved to the wall, a smooth stone surface about 20 feet high. Kurenai demonstrated the technique, focusing your chakra into your feet to create adhesion, then walking up the wall as if gravity was merely a suggestion. The first several students failed spectacularly. 2 made it halfway up before losing concentration and tumbling back down. 1 actually managed to reach 3/4 of the way before sliding backward with a yelp. Then it was Naruto's turn. He approached the wall calmly, and without any visible hesitation, simply walked up it. His feet touched the stone and stuck as if he was walking on solid ground. He crested the top of the wall and continued walking across the flat roof of an adjacent building as casually as if he was strolling down a street. The entire class stared in silence. "Well," Kurenai said, recovering from her shock, "that's one way to do it." Over the following weeks, this pattern repeated itself across every subject. In hand-to-hand combat, Naruto's form was so perfect that the combat instructor began asking him to demonstrate techniques to the older students. In ninjutsu theory, he grasped concepts that shouldn't have made sense to someone his age with an ease that was almost unsettling. In genjutsu, he showed an intuitive understanding that suggested he'd been studying the subject for years. The other students' reactions were mixed. Some, like Shikamaru Nara, a boy from the Shadow clan who had just begun attending the academy, seemed to regard Naruto's abilities with pragmatic acceptance. "He's just smarter and stronger," Shikamaru had said with a shrug when another student expressed frustration at consistently losing to Naruto in sparring. "No use complaining about it. Might as well learn from him." Others, particularly those from the more prestigious clans, viewed him with a mixture of curiosity and resentment. They had expected to be the strongest in their age group. The emergence of a blonde-haired child of no apparent clan affiliation who could outperform them at everything was disconcerting. Sasuke, now 5 years old, watched his older peer with intense interest from the younger children's section of the academy. The young Uchiha prodigy was several years below Naruto in his training, but he was already showing signs of the exceptional talent that would define him. What drew Sasuke's attention was that Naruto didn't treat him differently because of his clan status or his obvious potential. When they crossed paths in the academy courtyard, Naruto would acknowledge him with a nod and a genuine smile, nothing more, nothing less. To Sasuke, who was accustomed to adults fawning over him, or rival children trying to prove themselves against him, this casual acceptance was oddly refreshing. Sakura, now also 5 years old, was something different entirely. In this timeline, where bullying had been prevented before it could truly take root, Sakura had developed into a confident, sharp-eyed girl who was serious about her studies but not obsessively so. She had noticed Naruto early on. It was impossible not to, but unlike many of the other students who either resented or idolized him, she had simply decided to study his technique and learn from observing his movements. When they were paired for a sparring exercise 3 months into the academy year, she held her own admirably. "You're good," Naruto said after their match, helping Sakura up from where she'd been thrown to the mat. "Your chakra control is excellent for your age, and your form is solid." "I learned by watching you," Sakura admitted, brushing dust from her ninja gi. "The way you distribute your weight, the way you transition between stances, it's efficient." Naruto studied her for a moment, seeming to reassess her. "You have the makings of an exceptional shinobi. Keep practicing, and don't let anyone tell you that your gender or your clan status limits what you can achieve." It was such a simple statement, but to Sakura, who had spent her earlier years doubting herself, it felt like validation from someone whose opinion clearly mattered. The first real challenge to Naruto's carefully maintained normalcy came about 6 months into his academy attendance, when the academy's head instructor decided to assess all students' chakra reserves and potential. This was a routine evaluation, done annually at the academy, but it created a problem. Naruto's chakra reserves were literally off the charts. The assessment involved standing on a special stone platform that measured the quantity of chakra a student could channel into it. Most 8-year-olds could produce enough chakra to make the stone glow faintly green. The gifted ones could turn it blue. Sasuke, who took the test the same day, turned it a deep indigo. When Naruto placed his hand on the stone, it didn't glow. It blazed. The color that emerged was white gold, brighter than anything the academy instructors had ever seen from a child. And the stone didn't just glow, it began to vibrate, and cracks appeared in its surface from the sheer intensity of the chakra being channeled into it. The instructor monitoring the test stood up immediately, his expression alarmed. "That's enough," he said, gesturing for Naruto to remove his hand. "Step back." Naruto complied, and the stone immediately stopped vibrating. The damage to its surface was evident. Deep fissures ran through the previously smooth surface, and the chakra saturation had burned small cracks into the stone itself. "Report to the Hokage's office immediately," the instructor said to Naruto, and there was something like fear in his voice. "Don't speak to anyone about this. Go now." Naruto walked through the academy's corridors at a measured pace, unsurprised by the outcome. He'd known his chakra reserves were abnormal, had anticipated that eventually the academy's measurements would detect something unusual. But he'd underestimated just how dramatic the visual evidence would be. By the time he reached the Hokage's office, word had already spread through the academy. He could feel the chakra signatures of other instructors being called to the building, could sense the low-level panic that was rippling through the administrative structure. The third Hokage was waiting for him, and he was not alone. Kakashi stood to one side of the desk, his expression unreadable behind his mask. On the other side stood Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, a man whose power was exceeded by very few in the entire shinobi world. And behind the desk, the third Hokage himself regarded Naruto with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Sit," Hiruzen said simply, gesturing to the chair in front of his desk. Naruto sat. "The academy instructors have reported an unusual result from the chakra assessment," the third Hokage continued. "They say that your chakra reserves are exceptional. Abnormally so. Kakashi has been reviewing your training progress, and he's noted that despite only having been in official training for 6 months, your capabilities rival those of academy students 3 times your age." The third Hokage paused, studying Naruto intently. "I need you to explain to me how this is possible, Naruto. And I need you to be honest." Naruto had been preparing for this conversation for over a year. The question was how much to reveal and to whom. "My father was Minato Namikaze," Naruto said carefully. The statement was a bombshell in the office. He could see the shock register on every face. The fourth Hokage. "My mother was Kushina Uzumaki, of the Uzumaki clan. I inherited their talents." "That explains nothing," Jiraiya said bluntly. "I trained with Minato for years. He didn't have chakra reserves like what the Academy Stone is suggesting. And the Uzumaki clan, while strong, didn't produce individuals with reserves like this." Naruto turned to look at Jiraiya directly. "Did my father ever tell you about sealing technology? About what he discovered regarding the nature of chakra and how to optimize it?" Recognition flickered across Jiraiya's face. The legendary Sannin had worked with Minato before the fourth ascension to Hokage, and he would have been aware of Minato's research into advanced sealing techniques. "You're saying your chakra reserves are artificially augmented?" Jiraiya asked. "A seal? A complex network of seals," Naruto corrected. "My father created them before I was born. They're designed to channel and optimize chakra flow, to create efficiency where there would otherwise be limitation. With them, my reserves are substantial." It was a lie, but a carefully constructed one. Minato had indeed been working on such seals, and the third Hokage would know this. By crediting the seals to Minato rather than explaining that they were created by the Sage of Six Paths himself, Naruto was creating a framework that made sense within the established reality of the village. Kakashi made a small sound that might have been recognition or approval. "This is consistent with what Minato was researching before his death," Hiruzen said slowly, and Naruto could see the old Hokage re-evaluating the situation in his mind. "Kakashi, you trained under Minato. What do you think?" "I think," Kakashi said carefully, "that Naruto is telling us a truth about his inheritance, even if not the complete truth. And I think that whatever power he possesses, he's using responsibly. His instructors have noted no arrogance, no excessive force, no desire to dominate his peers despite being capable of doing so. That's because he's been taught better, Jiraiya said thoughtfully, and there was something almost like respect in his tone. A child with this much power, trained properly, could be either the greatest threat this village has ever faced or its greatest protector. The question is which one Naruto will choose to be. I choose to protect, Naruto said simply. Not because I'm forced to, but because I believe it's right. The third Hokage and Jiraiya exchanged a look. Some silent communication passed between them. Two of the oldest and wisest shinobi in the village were making a judgment about this 8-year-old boy who claimed to be heir to both the legendary fourth Hokage and the Uzumaki clan sealing expertise. Very well, Hiruzen said finally. We will not restrict your training or development. However, Naruto, we do need to adjust your education. An ordinary academy curriculum will not adequately challenge you or prepare you for what your power implies. Kakashi and Jiraiya will take over your advanced instruction. You will continue attending the academy to maintain normal socialization with your peers. But your real training will happen elsewhere, and we'll need to monitor you, Jiraiya added. Not out of distrust, but out of duty. Power like this tends to attract attention, not all of it benign. There are forces in this world that would try to exploit or destroy someone with your potential. Naruto nodded, accepting the terms. In truth, he'd been expecting something like this for some time. There's one more thing, Naruto said, and he looked directly at the third Hokage. Kakashi knows some of this already. But I need you to know, the nine-tailed beast seal is not stable. Not in the way you think it is. My father's seals are deteriorating slowly, and if they fail completely, the beast could break free. The temperature in the room seemed to drop precipitously. Explain, Hiruzen commanded, his voice suddenly sharp with urgency. The Nine Tails was sealed into me before I was born, Naruto said, speaking with the authority of someone who understood sealing at a fundamental level. The seal my father created was designed to hold until I reached adulthood, and could potentially take control of the beast's power. But the seal is not a permanent solution. It's a temporary measure that requires active maintenance to prevent degradation. Jiraiya was already moving, pulling chakra-sensing equipment from his pockets, and beginning to examine Naruto's chakra signature carefully. He's right, the legendary Sannin said after a moment. There are cracks in the seal's structure. Not dangerous ones, not yet, but if they're not addressed. He trailed off, understanding the implications. How long? Hiruzen asked. Years, Naruto said. Several years, at minimum. Enough time to learn how to strengthen the seal, to develop proper maintenance protocols. But I wanted you to know now because this is something that needs to be addressed with intention and care, not discovered in crisis. The third Hokage leaned back in his chair, looking suddenly older than Naruto had ever seen him. Your father left you with quite a burden, Hiruzen said softly. But I suppose that's the nature of inheritance. We receive not only gifts but responsibilities. Over the following year, Naruto's life underwent a transformation. He continued attending the academy, but his actual training now took place in private locations throughout the village, with Kakashi and Jiraiya serving as his primary instructors. Kakashi focused on practical application, combat technique, and the strategic use of power. Jiraiya, for his part, delved into the theoretical and philosophical underpinnings of chakra, sealing, and the nature of the Sage of Six Paths power. It was during one of these sessions with Jiraiya that Naruto made a discovery that would prove significant. The fact that you carry Six Paths chakra, Jiraiya was explaining. They were sitting in a secluded training ground deep in the forests outside the village, means that theoretically, you should be able to access all 5 basic nature transformations. Most shinobi are naturally attuned to 1 or 2, but the sage's power transcends such limitations. I've already begun developing all 5, Naruto replied, and he demonstrated by producing 5 small flames, each a different nature. Fire burned bright red. Lightning crackled white-blue. Water flowed in a perfect sphere. Earth formed dense stone. Wind sliced through the air with invisible sharpness. Jiraiya's eye widened. You've already achieved all 5 nature transformations? How long have you been working on this? Since I was 5, Naruto said. I have. I remember understanding these concepts from before. My father apparently did extensive research into nature transformation, and I inherited notes, and seals from his collection. This was technically true. The knowledge Naruto possessed about nature transformation did come from Minato's research, though Naruto's own understanding far exceeded what Minato had achieved. The sage's power included intuitive knowledge of how chakra could be shaped and transformed. Remarkable, Jiraiya breathed. He was quiet for a moment, then continued, I need to ask you something, Naruto, and I need you to answer me honestly. When I touch your chakra, when I examine your seal, I sense something else. Something ancient. It's faint, like an echo or a ghost imprint, but it's there. What am I sensing? Naruto had been waiting for this question. Jiraiya was too skilled, too experienced not to eventually notice the presence of the sage's power infusing his being. The sage of six paths, Naruto said simply. My power comes from him. Not just the inheritance through my father, but directly from the sage himself. Jiraiya's entire body went rigid. That's impossible, the legendary Sannin said flatly. Hagoromo has been dead for centuries. Millennia even. No one has communicated with him in recorded history. I have, Naruto said. Not through normal means, but through a direct intervention. He appeared to me after an event I can't fully discuss. And he gave me power and knowledge to change things. Change what things? Jiraiya pressed. The course of fate, Naruto replied. The cycle of hatred that defines this world. Jiraiya-san, I know this sounds insane, but the sage of six paths believed that without intervention, the shinobi world was doomed to destroy itself. He gave me the ability to see patterns that others can't see, to understand the connections between people and events in ways that allow for real change. Jiraiya was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You know, before I became the Sage of Six Paths biographer, I was a war profiteer, he said. I traveled between villages, selling information and ninja services to whoever could pay. I didn't care about ideology or righteousness. I cared about money and pleasure. But I've seen enough death, enough suffering, that I came to believe that there had to be a better way. That's why I started studying the sage, why I became interested in prophecy. I wanted to believe that change was possible. Is that belief still true? Naruto asked. I don't know, Jiraiya admitted. But if anyone were going to be chosen by the sage to bring about change, I suppose it would be someone like you, someone who has inherited Minato's genius but also his capacity for connection and love. Someone who understands that power without compassion is just destruction. Jiraiya extended his hand, and Naruto took it. The legendary Sannin's grip was firm and warm. I'll help you, Jiraiya said. Not because I'm certain you're right, but because I believe in the attempt, and because if what you're telling me is true, then the world is in far greater danger than anyone realizes, and we need to address it. It was during this same period that Naruto's influence began to manifest in ways that were becoming increasingly visible to those who knew how to look. Itachi, now approaching his teenage years, had undergone a subtle shift. The darkness that had been creeping into his thoughts, the nihilism and the obsession with power and control, had been checked by his ongoing interactions with Naruto. The two would meet regularly in the training grounds or in isolated locations throughout the village, and they would discuss philosophy, power, duty, and the nature of fate itself. Itachi still questioned tradition and authority. But instead of that questioning leading to rejection and destruction, it was beginning to lead to a kind of sophisticated analysis. Perhaps things could be improved. Perhaps the clan structure didn't have to be absolute. Perhaps there were ways to honor the past while creating a better future. Mikoto Uchiha noticed the change in her son, and while she didn't know the full extent of Naruto's influence, she seemed to understand that whatever was happening was fundamentally positive. She had taken Naruto under her wing to some extent, inviting him to clan gatherings and introducing him to various Uchiha members as a promising young talent. This had created an interesting dynamic. Naruto was now genuinely integrated into the Uchiha clan in a way that would have been impossible in his previous life. And more than that, through his presence and his philosophy, he was beginning to subtly reshape the clan's culture. Itachi's younger brother Sasuke, meanwhile, was showing all the signs of becoming the prodigy his clan expected, but he was doing so without the arrogance that had defined his path in the original timeline. Partly this was because Naruto was a constant presence of someone even more talented and powerful, who showed no pride or domination-seeking behavior. And partly it was because Sasuke was growing up seeing his brother more balanced, more thoughtful, less consumed by ambition. Elsewhere in the village, other connections were forming. Shikamaru, the young strategist, had begun to regard Naruto with the kind of respect that only came from intellectual recognition. The Nara prodigy understood that Naruto's power came with intelligence, that every decision Naruto made was calculated and deliberate. They had formed a tentative friendship based on mutual respect for each other's capabilities. Choji, Shikamaru's best friend, had been won over simply by Naruto's genuine kindness and lack of judgment. The Akimichi clan member had encountered considerable bias about his appearance and his weight throughout his childhood. Naruto treated him with the same straightforward respect he showed everyone, and Choji appreciated that. Niji Hyuga, the genius of the Hyuga clan, had a more complicated relationship with Naruto. The Byakugan had shown Niji that Naruto's power was even more vast and complex than it appeared to normal sight. But rather than being intimidated or resentful, Niji had begun to wonder if perhaps Naruto's presence in the village was a sign that fate itself was not as absolute as he'd been taught. And Kurenai, the academy instructor, had become something of a mentor figure herself. She had quickly recognized that Naruto was the real deal, not a child showing off, and she had taken it upon herself to offer him additional training in Genjutsu, a discipline where his natural talent was less pronounced than in other areas. By the time Naruto turned 9 years old, he had built a network of connections throughout the village and the ninja world at large that transcended normal hierarchies and clan structures. It was a network built on respect, mutual benefit, and genuine connection. It was, Naruto reflected while meditating one evening, exactly what the world needed. The first real test of Naruto's knowledge came when he was 9 years old, about 2 years into his second life. He was training alone in a forest clearing when he felt the chakra signature he'd been waiting for, Orochimaru, one of the legendary Sannin, moving through the area with purpose. In his first life, Orochimaru had been an abstract threat, someone Naruto encountered primarily through his agents and subordinates. But Naruto knew what the pale-skinned Sannin was capable of. He knew about the human experimentation, the sealing research, the quest for immortality that would eventually transform Orochimaru into something beyond human. And Naruto knew that in this timeline, Orochimaru was beginning to move away from the village, beginning the process of establishing his secret bases and developing his twisted research agenda. The figure that emerged from the trees was instantly recognizable. Orochimaru looked almost exactly as Naruto remembered him from the previous timeline: pale skin, yellow eyes, an expression of casual malice. But there was something different about his approach. He seemed unsurprised to find Naruto there. "Naruto Uzumaki," Orochimaru said, his voice like silk sliding over broken glass. "I've been curious about you. The reports I've received suggest you're quite remarkable for such a young child. A genius in the making, they say. Though genius seems like such a limiting term for what I sense in you." Naruto stood, not taking a defensive posture but not relaxing either. "Orochimaru. I wasn't expecting to meet you here, weren't you?" Orochimaru smiled, and it was a predatory expression. "I have the feeling you're always expecting something, young one. You carry yourself with the confidence of someone far older than your body suggests. It's quite intriguing. I want you to leave the village," Naruto said, and his voice was steady and calm. "I know you're planning to eventually abandon Konoha to pursue your research. Do it now. Do it completely, and do it without harming anyone else." Orochimaru's expression shifted to one of genuine interest. "You're challenging me?" A 9-year-old child is attempting to order around one of the legendary Sannin. That takes either remarkable courage or remarkable foolishness. "It's either," Naruto replied. "It's knowledge. I know what you'll become if you stay here. I know the path you're on, the experiments you'll conduct, the people you'll hurt. And I'm offering you an alternative. Leave now, and I'll ensure that your work, your real work, not the monstrous perversions you'll create, isn't lost to history." Something flashed across Orochimaru's face. Was it intrigue? Recognition? "You speak as if you know my future," the Sannin said slowly. "As if you've seen the path I'm destined to walk." "I have," Naruto said simply. "Not all of it, but enough. You don't have to become what you become. But if you stay here, in this village, with people who will eventually betray your trust or restrict your research, then I believe you will. So I'm asking you to leave. Orochimaru began to circle Naruto slowly, studying him like a predator assesses prey. And if I refuse? The Sannin asked. If I decide that your warnings are intriguing but insufficient motivation for me to abandon decades of work in this village, then I'll stop you, Naruto said. Not by killing you, but by preventing your research. By protecting those you would experiment on. By being the obstacle in your path that you cannot overcome. Can you truly stand against me? Orochimaru asked, and he extended his chakra outward in a wave that was meant to intimidate, to demonstrate the vast gulf between a legendary Sannin and a child. Naruto met the wave of power with his own, and the two chakra signatures collided in the clearing like titans clashing. Trees bent. Leaves were torn from branches. Small stones were lifted into the air, and Orochimaru felt, for the first time in many years, something like genuine fear. The power radiating from this small child was not the power of a prodigy, or a genius. It was the power of something fundamental, something ancient, something that operated on principles that went beyond normal chakra manipulation. The sage, Orochimaru realized with shock. This child carries the sage's power. When the two of them withdrew their chakra, the clearing was silent except for the sound of falling leaves. I see, Orochimaru said slowly. Well, that changes the calculation, doesn't it? A child chosen by Hagoromo himself would present challenges that go beyond mere power differential. I'm giving you a choice, Naruto repeated. Leave. Pursue your research, but do it responsibly. Or stay, and fight me. The outcome of that fight is uncertain, but I'm betting you're intelligent enough to recognize that neither of us wants it to happen. Orochimaru was silent for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You know, I came here intending to study you, to understand what makes you so exceptional. I was planning to observe and perhaps recruit you to my cause, but having felt your power directly, I realized that such recruitment would be indelicate. Will you leave? Naruto asked. Yes, Orochimaru said, and there was something almost like respect in his tone. I will leave Konoha. I'll pursue my research elsewhere, and I'll remember this meeting, little sage, as the day I chose preservation over destruction. Perhaps that will matter in the end. Orochimaru turned to leave, then paused. One thing before I go, the Sannin said without turning around. In your previous life, because I can sense that you've lived before, though I cannot fathom the mechanism, did I become the monster I feared I would become? Naruto considered the question carefully. Yes. You did things that were unforgivable. But you also eventually came to understand that power without purpose is hollow. I hope that in this timeline, you might reach that understanding sooner. Then I wish you luck, young Naruto Uzumaki, Orochimaru said. In changing the world. May you succeed where I failed. And with that, the legendary Sannin vanished into the forest, leaving Naruto alone in the clearing that was slowly settling back to normal. Naruto sat down heavily, suddenly aware of how exhausted he felt. The confrontation had required him to push his power to a level he'd been careful to avoid in public before. But it had been necessary. Orochimaru's departure from the village at this early stage would prevent countless atrocities. Are you well? Kurama asked, his consciousness touching Naruto's with concern. I'm fine, Naruto replied. Just tired. But I did it, Kurama. I actually changed something. Orochimaru isn't going to stay in the village. He's not going to conduct experiments on innocents, at least not under the protection of Konoha. That's a good thing, right? Yes, the nine-tailed beast rumbled. That is good. You are learning to use your knowledge wisely, small human. Not every prediction you make must come true. Some can be changed through will and power. Naruto meditated through the night, allowing Kurama's chakra to flow through him, centering himself, processing the weight of what he'd accomplished. By morning, he felt restored, though a new awareness had settled into his consciousness. He had the power to change things. But that power came with a price. It meant being constantly aware of what could go wrong, of what would go wrong without intervention. It meant being the guardian against catastrophe. It meant accepting that some of the burden of the world rested on his shoulders. When Naruto returned to the village the next day, he found Jiraiya waiting for him at the training ground where they usually met. You confronted Orochimaru, the legendary Sannin said without preamble. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Naruto asked. Because I felt the chakra disturbance from half a mile away, Jiraiya replied. I was investigating potential threats to the village when I sensed two massive signatures colliding. By the time I arrived, it was over, and there was a trail of the Sannin's chakra heading away from Konoha. Jiraiya stepped closer, studying Naruto intently. Tell me what happened. So Naruto explained, the meeting, the confrontation, the choice he'd offered Orochimaru, and the Sannin's ultimate decision to leave. When he finished, Jiraiya was quiet for a long moment. You know what you've done, don't you? The legendary Sannin finally said. By convincing Orochimaru to leave the village now, at this stage of his descent, you've potentially prevented countless deaths. The experiments he would have conducted, the techniques he would have developed, all of it is now potentially averted. Or delayed, Naruto said quietly. He said he'd pursue his research elsewhere. I didn't stop him completely. No, Jiraiya agreed. But you changed the timeline. You actually changed it. And that's... The legendary Sannin trailed off, shaking his head. That's both inspiring and terrifying, because now I have to wonder what else you know. What other catastrophes are you preventing? What other futures are you reshaping? Many, Naruto admitted. But I can't control everything. Some people, some events, they seem to be fixed points. I don't know why, but when I try to change them, it's like pushing against something immovable. The sage's knowledge isn't perfect, Jiraiya said thoughtfully. That makes sense. Even Hagoromo himself was subject to the limitations of understanding, but the fact that you're working to change things at all, that you're using your power not for dominance but for connection and prevention of suffering, that's what matters. Jiraiya placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. You're carrying a heavy responsibility now, Naruto. More than any 9-year-old should have to carry. But you're also not alone. The village is beginning to recognize your importance, even if they don't understand its source. And there are those of us who will help you bear this weight. Thank you, Naruto said simply. That evening, when Naruto attended a meeting with the third Hokage, he found that word of Orochimaru's departure had already spread through the leadership of Konoha. The implications were being analyzed and discussed. Orochimaru has effectively resigned from his position, Hiruzen told Naruto and Kakashi, who was also present. He sent a formal notice claiming he needed to pursue personal research opportunities. The council is satisfied with the explanation, though there's no small amount of concern about his departure given his status as one of the legendary Sannin. The third Hokage studied Naruto carefully. Kakashi tells me you were training in the forest when this happened. And Jiraiya has mentioned that there was some kind of chakra disturbance in the area. I met with him, Naruto said, deciding that honesty was the best approach. I told him I believed it was better for both him and the village if he left. And he simply accepted that? Hiruzen asked, surprised. He understood that the cost of staying would be higher than the cost of leaving, Naruto replied. He's intelligent. He made the logical choice. The third Hokage exchanged a look with Kakashi, the same kind of silent communication Naruto had seen before when adults were trying to determine what to make of his unusual abilities. Your maturity continues to surprise me, Hiruzen said finally. But it also concerns me. You're beginning to exercise influence over events in ways that most shinobi never would, at an age when most children are still learning basic jutsu. I want to make sure that you understand the responsibility that comes with such influence. I do, Naruto said. And I'm trying to be careful. I'm trying to only intervene when I believe it's truly necessary, when I can see that the outcome of an action would be worse than the outcome of action. That's a heavy philosophical burden, Hiruzen observed. But I believe you're equipped to handle it. Just remember, Naruto, that even the sage of 6 paths made mistakes. Even he couldn't foresee all consequences. If you're to inherit his power and his responsibility, you must also inherit his humility. I'll try, Naruto promised. As he left the Hokage's office that evening, Naruto reflected on how far he'd come in just 2 years of this second life. He'd gone from a reborn soul in a 5-year-old body to someone whose opinion was being taken seriously by the leadership of Konoha. He prevented a legendary Sannin from descending into complete darkness. He'd begun building genuine bonds with people across clan lines and social hierarchies. And yet, he knew that this was just the beginning. Ahead of him lay years of careful maneuvering, of strategic interventions, of trying to guide a world toward peace. Years of carrying knowledge that would be a burden, of knowing what could go wrong and feeling responsible for preventing it. But as he walked through the village streets toward home, seeing children playing without fear of war, seeing merchants conducting business without constant threat, seeing the village that he loved existing in a moment of peace, he felt something that transcended the weight of responsibility. He felt hope. And he felt, too, the presence of Kurama in his mindscape, no longer a beast struggling against imprisonment, but a companion walking beside him in the great work of changing the world.